How's it going? My name's Nico. I go by COINTrick and cointricktwitch online. If you want to see more videos like this one, please remember to like and subscribe. Hit that bell so you get notified every time I upload another one of these videos. How's it going? My name's Nico. I go by COINTrick and cointricktwitch online. We've been doing a series of 3-part videos where we teach you guys how to build a bar and master classic cocktails. We've already done this for Old Fashioned, Manhattan Daiquiri, Martini, the Long Island Iced Tea, and the Last Word. So in part 1, I teach you guys how to make and master a simple recipe for a classic cocktail. This time, we're going to be covering the Martini. Then in part 2, I'll show you guys some extra ingredients that you can get, some substitutions that you can make inside of that original recipe to make other classic cocktails that are in that same family of cocktails. And then in part 3, we're gonna get weird. I'm gonna show you guys how to make a signature cocktail in that style that we are covering in parts 1 and 2. And then I'll show you some extra techniques that you can use at work or at home so that your drinks really do stand out. Quick note, the oldest known recipe for the Martini comes from, I believe, the Waldorf Astoria Hotel. Or at least that's where I believe it was served. And it had sweet vermouth and syrup and bitters. It's very different from the recipe that we use for traditional martinis now. So we're not going to be covering that original recipe. We're going to be covering the simplest recipe for a regular martini that I can make for you guys. There are some extra terms that you can use when you're ordering your martini. There's like a whole extra coded language to it, kind of like ordering a coffee. So you've probably heard dry, extra dry, dirty, and extra dirty. I'll get into that stuff. I'll tell you guys what all that stuff means, but I'm going to save most of those differences and most of those notes for part 2. We're not going to cover all of that stuff here in part 1. Let's focus on this simple recipe. So, what do you need to make the martini? Well, the simplest way to make this is only going to be 2 ingredients. Some people will have 3, some people have bitters in here. I'm just going to do 2. We're going to make this easy, and it's going to make it a lot easier to understand and dial in. So your liquor is going to be your gin, and the only other ingredient that you're going to need besides ice is going to be your vermouth. Make sure you have dry vermouth. I recommend Dolan Dry. I believe it's a relatively well-established industry standard. Whatever you can find will work just fine, and I'll show you guys how to dial it in. You know, if the vermouth isn't exactly right, how to adjust it so that you still enjoy your drink. So for equipment, you're gonna need a stirring glass, stirring rod, coupe glass, and a jigger, and that's it. So no knife, no juicer, no peeler, no sets of tins or anything like that. If you don't have a stirring glass at home, that's okay. You can stir this inside of a separate glass if you want to. You could build it in your glass if you really absolutely had to. I happen to have this stuff laying around, so I'm using this. And if you don't have a stirring rod, that's also fine. You could use a regular spoon. This one happens to be a bar spoon. All right, so how do you make this cocktail? Well, let's get everything separated out. Let's start with 2 ounces of our gin. I'm gonna make this one a little bit heavy. And then you're gonna add 1 ounce of your dry vermouth. Bonus points if your dry vermouth is still chilled. And quick note, make sure that when you're not actively using your vermouth and you don't need it to make a bunch of drinks, you put it away and put it in the fridge. This is wine, technically, so it will go bad, and that will cause some funk and some weird stuff to happen in your drink. So this needs ice. I'll be right back. Cool. All right. You can shake this at home if you really want to for stylistic reasons or whatever. 3 main differences that will happen if you do decide to actually shake this cocktail. 1, it will dilute a whole lot faster, so it might be too watery. 2, you'll have a cloudy sort of martini instead of a very clear one like the one that we're about to pour out. And then 3, it's going to be incredibly cold. So the 3 main differences between shaken versus stir. There's some other like really romantic notions about bruising the gin and stuff like that, but for the most part, it's going to be cloudy, it's going to be really cold, and it's probably going to be watered down. Ooh, look at that. It's almost like a laminar flow. So look at how clear that is. It's a little bit cloudy because I just finished stirring it, but when you shake this, it's opaque. It's almost white. You can't see through it. So let's see how it tastes. Tastes like a regular martini. If you do happen to have orange bitters at home, one common thing to do with this is going to be to add 2 dashes of orange bitters, basically building this the way you would build a Manhattan with the 2-1-2 ratio. This is good, but it's not perfect. And by the way, it's never going to be perfect. It shouldn't be perfect the first time you make it. That just doesn't happen. Don't beat yourselves up. I'm not going to beat myself up, but I will tell you guys how to tell what's wrong with the drink and how to fix it. So before we get into that, a note that I mentioned during all of these videos is that your cocktails, all of your ingredients in every cocktail that has ever existed only has 5 different roles: liquor, lengthener, sweet, sour, and spice. There are only 2 ingredients here, so this is going to get a little bit complicated, so you need to stick with me for this. The simplest one here, your liquor, your base liquor, is going to be your gin, or your vodka if you decided to get vodka instead of gin. So if this is too strong, then I would actually recommend either remaking it and shaking it instead of stirring it so that you get more of that dilution, and that extra chill takes some of the heat off of the drink, makes it easier, more refreshing to drink. If you don't want to have to remake the entire drink, you could also just stir it again, try to get it a little bit colder, get it diluted, stir it for a little bit longer. The second thing is going to be your dilution, which is your lengthener in this drink, the second of those 5 roles that I mentioned before. So if your drink is too watery, what do? If you shook it, it's almost definitely going to be too watery, but if you stirred it and it's too watery, that gets a little bit more complicated. My recommendation would be to add a little bit more of your base liquor and then just kind of leave it alone. That should fix it, if you don't want to have to start over from scratch. The third, fourth, and fifth roles, your sweet, sour, and spice, are actually all coming from your vermouth in this recipe. If you made it with orange bitters, your orange bitters is going to be that spice component. It's going to be the thing that's lending the smell and the aromas and stuff like that. But here, since we didn't use those, it's just the vermouth, and that's going to make it a little bit easier to dial in. The thing that typically goes wrong with the vermouth, there are actually 2 things. If your drink is too astringent, it's too like aromatic or like pungent or anything like that, or it's too concentrated, then it could mean that your vermouth has set out and it's oxidized. It's created some acetic acid in here that's causing this to be too astringent. To fix that, you're just gonna be able to add ice. That's pretty much it. That's really the main thing that you do when you're trying to fix a martini. The only other thing that you could do is add some more of the liquor and try and balance that out. Be very careful when you're not remaking your cocktails from scratch and you're just adding liquor on top, because it makes it harder to remember exactly what those ratios and those adjustments were that you made. So we started with a regular 2 parts gin, 1 part dry vermouth. So if I wanted to fix this by adding a 1/4 ounce of gin, I now have to remember that this is technically 2 1/4 ounces gin and then 1 ounce of dry vermouth. This, in my opinion, it's a little bit astringent. I can tell by the flavor it's coming from the dry vermouth. So I'm gonna add that 1/4 ounce of this gin. Just here on top. If you're doing this at work, obviously don't just do that. But you know, if you're making it at home and you're making it for yourself, there really aren't many rules that you need to abide by. All right, let's see how it tastes. So much better. All right, I'm excited to dive into part 2, but first, why did I choose this cocktail? Well, as ubiquitous as the martini is, and as old as the recipe is, right? Even this recipe is really, really old and classically accepted. It's still incredibly misunderstood, and there is so much misinformation surrounding the martini and how to order it because of all of that extra coded language that goes into ordering it. Because ordering your martini is the same as ordering your coffee. You gotta tell whoever's making your coffee if you want cream, if you want sugar, and how much. And there's an extra set of words for those things that mean extra things when you're ordering coffee that don't normally mean those things in English. So common ones for your martini are gonna be dry, dirty, and then perfect, wet vodka. Pretty standard ones. Really, it's whether something is dry or extra dry that gets people confused, and we'll cover that in part 2. And then in part 3, I'll show you guys how to make a signature cocktail and some extra advanced techniques that you can use to make sure that your signature martini stands out from all of the others. Thank you guys for tuning in, sticking around. I appreciate it. Thanks for all of your help and support. Hopefully I've been helpful and supportive for you all as well, since that's why we do everything that we do here. If you learned anything, please remember to like and subscribe, and comment what drinks you want to learn how to make at home or at work. And I'll see you guys in the next video.